Hello, Shortridge. I'm Gabrielle Jones. Today we have with us John French, a director of claims at McGowan Insurance. How are you today, John?
Doing great. Thank you, Gary.
So to get started, I would like you to describe your role at your current company and how you ended up in this role.
Okay, I am the Director of Claims for McGowan Insurance Group, and I handle property and casualty claims. And property and casualty can mean auto, business insurance, homeowners insurance, pretty much anything you can think of in terms of property and actually injuries, workers' compensation, bodily injury, whether that be from a slip and fall or from workers' compensation. Been with McGowan about 7.5 years in insurance since 1986 when I got out of college.
So, what is the most interesting part of your job?
Every day there's something different. I can have 10 of the same claims. I can handle 10 rear end claims, but every one is going to be different from that auto accident. There could be injuries, there could be exotic cars involved, famous people that I have to deal with, any number of things that I've run into that I never thought I would ever experience. Every day is completely different. A lot of things are the same, but no day is the same.
What are a few misconceptions people have about your career and why do you disagree?
In terms of claims adjusting, a lot of people think insurance adjusters, which I'm no longer an adjuster, I'm an advocate for the insurance agency to help out my policyholders to work with the insurance companies. But a lot of people think that the insurance adjusters are out to get them. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. There are those that may fit that description, but a lot of times the adjusters are investigating claims to determine the facts and the damages, and they're trying to gather information to see what is owed in terms of the claim that is being presented. And a lot of people think, well, those insurance people, they're sitting on a pile of money and they only want to pay that money to those who they think is entitled to the money. That's not necessarily the case because there are laws that prevent people from doing that. It is just the investigation process that gets in the way and is somewhat complicating, especially when you're dealing with situations when people's homes or cars or businesses are damaged, or unfortunately when people are injured or unfortunately pass away.
Okay. For you, how important is it to have hobbies outside of work and what are your hobbies?
It's very important because what I try to do, I come into work fairly early in the morning, sometimes 7 o'clock in the morning. I usually start my day with this, looking at my claims on my phone, see what's going on, and after work. But I start my day early, but when it's time to leave work, I try to walk out the door and leave all my work there. On occasion, I will look at my phone and handle some things, but I'll go home. I do a lot of yard work. I'm involved in some community activities here and there, but I also do a lot of exercising. I work out at the gym, I walk, and I do, of course, socialize with my friends.
Um, so how is like the work experience in an office space opposed to somewhere else?
I like being in an office space because the fact that you get to interact with your coworkers. Um, I have worked at home and experienced that, and it seems like there's a missing piece. It's easy enough to contact somebody by phone or send them an email and ask them questions, but to go and see somebody face to face and talk to them and actually have a one-on-one interaction that way is better for me, and I believe most people, than it is to do things otherwise via the phone or an email. Of course, in this day and age with COVID and now with Teams or Zoom, that sort of thing, it's become very handy to have this sort of an interaction, which is the next best thing, but it's still not the same as being there.
How has your current career changed your perspective?
How's my current career changed with what? I'm sorry.
Your perspective.
Um, Again, every day is different. Sometimes I think things are supposed to be one way, and then I have an event or a claim or a situation that changes my perspective on things. So at times my job, I can be somewhat jaded in thinking that things aren't necessarily the way that they appear. So I need to be more patient and understand the situation and let it work through and actually know the facts in the situation before I should pass judgment. But we all tend to do that up front. But I've gotten better the older I've gotten to not necessarily see what I believe up front and then dig deeper and then find out what really is going on.
Do you have any funny or unexpected stories about your teenage years?
About my teenage years
Yeah.
that I can say here. Yeah, it's funny. I had my 40th high school reunion on Saturday, and so it was interesting that got to be with people that I went to high school with. I went to Brebeuf, but I grew up in Broadville. But I had friends that went to all sorts of different schools. But a funny experience. I wasn't ready for that one. I'll have to think about that and get back to you. I'm going to write that down and I'll come to it. Go ahead with the next question.
Okay. Is there a person you look up to and why?
Oh, I would say my parents, even though they're deceased, primarily my dad. He was a World War II vet. And by the way, both my parents went to Shortridge. Gabby, you know that. We've talked about that. But my dad was a World War II veteran and was injured in World War II. And after he graduated from high school, he went to Butler for a year and ran track, ran for Tony Hinkle. He was the coach of just about everything over there at the time, but then was drafted in the war and then was injured in the war, stepped on a landmine, and then unfortunately lost his leg and then went to IU after that. But he pursued a career in insurance and he was an agent. I'm not an agent. I'm on the claim side, even though technically I have a license to sell insurance. But I looked at him as somebody who persevered with 1.5 legs, and that never slowed him down. He just kept going, and he never complained about it. That's just the way things were, way life was dealt. He had a lot of friends that were worse off than him and some that didn't make it home from the war. But the way he handled it and raised me and my brother and provided for my family, that's primarily who I look up to. And then my mom with how she would help him. And
do you have a favorite quote, book, poem, or song that gives you inspiration to succeed?
Well, my favorite book would be the Bible. I'm not a very religious person, but I would say that'd be my favorite book by far. And as far as a poem, I don't really have one per se, but there is a saying, and it's only 20 letters, but it's 10 words. And it is, if it is to be, it is up to me, which means if I'm going to do it, if it's going to be done, I'm going to have to do it. So I motivate myself to get things done. I'm not going to wait on somebody else or hope that something's going to be coming my way. I'm going to make that happen, whatever that may be.
Great piece of advice. So what's the shift from, do you remember when the shift was before you started thinking like that? I know a lot of our teenagers probably don't think like that, so.
Well, my mom got sick when I was pretty young after I got out of college. She had brain cancer and passed when I was 23, and I realized that it was just me and my dad. I have an older brother, but he wasn't in the house at the time, but I helped my dad out a lot. And I realized, once she got sick and before she passed that, a lot of it would have to rely on me. And before that, she would do things for me, or I would allow her to do things for me. So that was my shift, that it's my time. I've got to do what I need to do to help myself and my dad. Like I said, my brother was out of the house and he was married, so he was doing his own thing. But that's when it happened, probably about the time I was maybe 22, 23.
You could bring back a trend that our generation has not yet experienced. What would it be?
A trend?
Yeah, clothing, a dance.
I'd like to have more hair, but let's see here. I don't know. Boy, you got a couple of good questions here. I wish I had some time to think about that. I can't think of anything right now. Maybe customer service could improve, because when I was growing up, they say the customer is always right. Well, not necessarily, but you can say that. But anymore, I seem to be the one saying thank you when I go to a store or something like that. It doesn't matter if I'm dealing with somebody that's a teenager or if it's somebody that's my age or older. There's very little courtesy and respect for the customer. It's just more of a transactional type of deal. And I think more of the courtesy and thank you and respect for the customer. And that works both ways too. There's plenty of people that are not so nice to those providing the service, but I tried to do that. But I think that's a somewhat of a lost art and needs to be improved upon.
I agree. I think it's been lost in like everything's online and you just click a button and then boom, you have it. If you want to return it, just click a button and it's done.
Right.
All right. What are you looking forward to this year, career or life-wise?
In terms of career, just to keep doing what I'm doing and try to get better every day. I have this thing in my mind that work is a continuous improvement program for me. There's always something for me to learn, even though I've been in the business for a long time and I've dealt with a lot of different claims. There's always something new or different that I can improve upon. And that's what I always try to do and try to gather that knowledge to hopefully use that in the future. And I try to do that with my personal life as well. There's things that that I can improve on, the relationship with, family members and friends. I want to be the best that I can be, and there's times I'm not necessarily that guy, so I need to keep at it.
Do you have any advice on how to improve?
Listen, and sometimes listening is a tough thing to do. We hear, but if you listen to somebody, and it's not necessarily how they're saying it, but what they're saying, some of you may know who I'm talking about, but Bob Knight was the coach of IU basketball, and he would be quite loud or verbal with his players. And a lot of people said, don't listen to how he's telling you, listen to what he's telling you. And listen to the message, because that is the important thing. It may come across as somebody being upset with you, but what you have to boil it down to, all right, well, they're upset, but why are they upset? What are they trying to tell me? Is there something that I have done wrong? And what can I improve to solve this situation? Or sometimes it's people being emotional, and we understand that too, but it's listening to others, and that might be somebody younger than you, your same age, peers, anything. And also that comes from reading and also life experiences. You might see things that go on around you that impact your life. Things happen, unfortunately, negatively to other people, and it hasn't happened to you. You tend to realize how lucky you are and appreciate what you have.
So, have you came up with the answer for the story question?
The funny experience.
Yeah.
All right, let me think here. What is something I did? Probably wasn't the brightest move. Oh, I think shortly after I got my license, I was driving a real old car, and I just decided to go ahead and back out of a space. And little did I know that when I did that, there would be a car passing by. So I had an accident. And the other lady, there wasn't any damage to her car. There was a little bit of damage to my car, but it was an old Oldsmobile is the name of the make, and it didn't have much damage. And I don't even know if I told my dad, who was my agent, of course, at the time. But so it's one of those things like, okay, you're really a cool guy now. You're 16. They gave you the old car, but you also have to take care of yourself and be responsible with that car. So that's somewhat of a funny experience, but I would still, I got something better than that, but I would have to dig deeper as to what that is.
All right. So if students want to work as insurance claim like managers or along the lines of what you do, what would that educational path look like?
Well, I graduated from high school, and then I went to college. Usually the insurance companies and or agencies, not all the time, but they'll require a degree from college. And that could be an associate's degree, doesn't necessarily need to be a bachelor's degree or a 4-year degree. And then back when I started, a lot of the insurance companies would train people. I was sent to Chicago for 5 weeks by Liberty Mutual and trained up there. But the way I look at it, I'm still in training because, like I said, there's always something new and different every day that I'm learning. But usually that's the path, graduate from high school, and then some sort of a path, whether that be to go away for school or stay at home. Back then when I was starting out, coming out of high school, we didn't have Ivy Tech. It was not necessarily an option, and now it's a fantastic option to provide a couple of years of college before some people will do that before they move on to, say, Indiana University or all the other schools to get that sort of an education. And again, you can get your associates or use that background to move on. But that's how I kind of came about getting into the business world and that sort of thing, because that barrier was put up that you had to have a college degree. And I'm like, well, there were times which I really wondered if I was ever going to get that, because I was a little sick of school after a while, but I kept fighting. And that's what is best to do is to get as much education as you can, however you can get it, and use that to your advantage. And along those lines, I'm sorry, Gabby, knowledge is power. So that's another phrase I like to use.
So you touched on this a little bit. You said your dad he worked in insurance, so you worked in insurance as well. But I think a lot of people, they don't really think about insurance as a job. So did you ever think about anything else other than insurance, or because your dad was working there and it was something familiar, did you go straight to that?
No, when I went to college, I studied marketing, and what I really wanted to do is advertising. I've got a very creative mind, so I was hoping to get into some sort of advertising where, like with TV commercials, advertisements on billboards, anything and everything you would see like in magazines. I really enjoyed that. That was my favorite subject in college. That's where I really excelled. But unfortunately, it was one of those things that at that time of my life, my mom was sick. I had to go home and help my dad with my mom. I didn't have the opportunity to move to a media center like a Chicago, New York, LA, that sort of thing, London. And I had to go to plan B and use my creativity elsewhere.
So how does that creativity plug into insurance?
Well, with what I do and what other people do in my agency, as well as the industry, we have to be creative with solutions that we need to provide for our customers. Not everything fits in a nice little box. I know that there are things like that it can be transactional, like on our phone or a computer to buy insurance, and I'm not bad mouthing any of these companies because obviously there's a market for it, like Esurance is one of them. I think they're an all-state company where you can go out and get your insurance and you sign up and click a few buttons and then that's that. Well, we're not necessarily geared towards that. We want to listen to our customer, find out what their needs are. Sometimes they don't know what they need, and get creative and figure out what is going to be best for them, not to charge them X amount, but your needs are going to be different than mine. And what is the best policy or policies that we can provide for our customer? And insurance companies have a lot of different, other than the basic, it's called a policy form, but they have endorsements that can be added to policies, which will enhance coverage. And we talk about those things. What do these customers really need? There was a situation that came up earlier this year that with a backup of sewers and drains coverage, when there's water that backs up through your sewers or drains in your basement. Not an exciting topic, but a lot of policies don't have any coverage for that. And then if there's an endorsement, sometimes it's only $10,000. Well, I discovered that $10,000 isn't enough. So as an agency, I got thinking creatively, we need to take care of our people, our insureds. We need to raise that to $25,000. So people have their items that are stored in the basement, or if it's your furnace, water heater, any of those other items that are down there to be covered. And so they're not having to pull that money out of their own pocket. So I try to apply it in a different sort of way. So I will help my customers. And in any scenarios that I have with claims, I advocate for my customers. And a lot of times the adjusters don't necessarily see things. They're more like a horse with blinders on. So I try to open it up and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Working together to try to find the common solution.
Okay. That was a good advertisement. It's kind of like you're trying to sell us insurance now.
Sign up. Let me know. Excuse me, I take a drink. Okay.
So I'm not sure how much you can disclose about this, but funniest or craziest insurance story or like case?
The funniest one I can't tell you about because it's too unbelievable. We did have a claim. Well, let's see. What did I do? Oh, I did have a claim a few years ago where I worked at, it was called Indiana Insurance, but it's a different company now. It's Safeco. But an agent called me and said, hey, the fire department's here and they want to know if, I'm just going to say, Farmer Jones has any coverage on his barn and if they should put out the fire. And I said, they're there at your office. The barn is burning and they're asking me if they should put out the fire. I told them, hey, look, I don't have time to look up the coverage, but that's their job. Tell them to leave. I'll look up the coverage, but they need to go put out the fire. And she seemed somewhat dumbfounded that I told her that, you know, that's what you do, that you're a fireman. You don't go first to the insurance agency and find out if there's coverage. Go and put out the fire. And I understand why they did it, because a lot of volunteer fire departments, and this was in an area where it's not like Indianapolis where we pay for it with our taxes. These are volunteers that go out and do it. But a lot of those fire departments are paid off of a policy when there is coverage. And some of these things do not have voluntary fire department coverage back then. And so that's why they were doing it. But to me, you put out the fire and then you figure that out later, because more damage is being done at the time. That the common sense, just, I still haven't quite figured that out. So
that's ridiculous. What else are you gonna do? Just sit there and watch it burn?
Yeah, or wait till I have a chance to read through the policy, then hop in your truck and then go over to go put the fire out at the barn. But I don't know, it takes all kinds. But again, every day is different, and people ask me all sorts of questions that you know, I never thought I would be asked. So I've been threatened.
Threatened?
Yeah. And yeah, I was at this guy's house, and he didn't like what I was telling him. He said, maybe I ought to kick your, and I said, I think it's time for me to leave. And
yeah,
I'm relatively quick on my feet, so I got out of there, and I was ready to do whatever I needed to do if he came at me. But I left, and then I told him I'd get back to him, called him, and then he called me a name, and I just told him to have a nice day, and then that was that. So.
Oh man, that's scary.
Well, you know, you go to school and you think everything's in a book, and that's going to tell you everything you need to know. It's the real world experiences. I did have a situation where there's a lady here in the office that thought she had hail damage. So I said, hey, look, let me run out to your house. We'll take a look at it before you turn your claim in, see what you have. So she lived in an area of town. It's called Mars Hill, over by the airport. And so I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden this guy's walking down the street. He's got a pair of jeans on. He's got long hair, no shirt. It's, you know, it's a nice day. It's probably 85 degrees out. I got my ladder up, and he looked at me and stopped. And he goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm looking at the roof for hail damage. And he goes, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, you never know around here. It's Mars Hill. And I'm like, buddy, it's all good. I'm like, okay, I got to get out of here before something happens. But it can be a challenging area. But you have to have eyes in the back of your head and think on your feet. But he was nice enough. But, you know, you just never know who you're going to deal with or how people are going to react. And I think it's even scarier nowadays. I had a buddy of mine that he's an engineer and he looks at a lot of damaged properties, and he asked me if I carried a gun. And this is 20 years ago. And I said, no, I don't even own one. And he said, you don't? The areas that you're going in, you should. And I said, you know what? I've never had a problem. And I'm lucky. But, I mean, I use this as my gun. I shoot it off as opposed to anything else. And again, I've been lucky in that regard to work through things with people. And I've never gotten into a situation where it's been that negative where I would put my life at risk. I know when to keep my mouth shut and then get back to people if I have to, thank goodness. But that's been very, very rare.
Yeah, you deal with those people like pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, you see them on the road too, but
yeah, we're almost at the end of our time here. I just want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and be glad to talk to anybody about the wonderful world of insurance if they would like to.
So Shortridge, make sure you tune in next Wednesday at 2:15 to watch our next interview. So bye.
All right, thanks, Gabby. Take care.